Welcome to Beyond the Scale True Healing. If you've been with us before, thanks for coming back. If this is the first time you've joined us, we're so happy to meet you and invite you to check out our links to learn more about each of us, as well as ways to contact us for other opportunities. We'd love for you to subscribe and hit that notification button and like the videos and share with us your thoughts on what you see. Let us know what you think of this video, if you can relate, or ask questions that you have about our conversation. Let us know if there are people you'd like to hear from. We love your feedback and, as always, aim to be helpful to you. I just wanted to start with a little background for our viewers of why the conversation we're going to have today is important to us. People know that Stephanie, Claire, and I come from various backgrounds of disordered eating and addictions. And I can say personally that you can read all the things, follow all the people, research, and know the science, but implementing a low-carb, zero-carb, or carnivore way of eating is what brought me to knowing that I was addicted to sugar and carbs. This became clear very quickly and triggered binge eating behaviors. It's very important to us to have the conversation around psychologically as well as metabolically why this occurs for certain people, as this is an integral part of understanding ourselves and our behaviors.
Right. And Dr. Unwin is a clinical psychologist who worked in the UK in the national health system, helping people with chronic health conditions to have the best quality of life possible for them. This included many diabetics. She also collaborated with her husband, Dr. David Unwin, an award-winning general practitioner known for pioneering the low-carb approach in the UK. Dr. Unwin has many patients in his clinic who are drug-free diabetics reversed with low-carb approach. Their collaboration has been life-changing for so many and sets such an amazing example and precedent for what we could be doing and possibly how to proceed in the United States. Welcome, Dr. Unwin. Thank you so much for being here today to talk about what we think is such an important part of the conversation. It's estimated that 20% or more of the population could be labeled as food addicted, and yet there's still no official diagnosis for this, which could go a long way in helping people to receive the help that they need. The three of us here at Beyond the Scale, Claire wasn't able to join us today, but Amy, Claire, and I use a meat-based diet, but we've all faced challenges that have made this difficult at times, including our addiction to processed food, carbs, and sugar.
So I wanted to start, Dr. Unwin, thank you so much for being here, by asking you to maybe describe to us what your relationship with food as a child and into adulthood was like, and what brought you maybe to understanding finally what eventually led to food freedom for you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think my story is actually pretty typical, which now I find quite comforting. Of course, as we're going through it on our own, we think we're the only one who has these struggles, don't we? And we tend not to talk about it. But so I never remember a time, I don't know about you guys, I never remember a time when I wasn't obsessed with food, particularly sweet things, carby things. You know, it could be savory carby things. And I often tell this, you know, when people ask me, that my earliest memory as a little kid was we'd been sent to Sunday school, and at this Sunday school we'd made cheese scones, which I thought was like, you know, amazing. It's kind of stuck in my mind. And when I got home, I just wanted to eat all of them. I didn't want to share them because I'd made them. So they were my cheese scones. That was the sort of set the tone, really. I was always trying to, you know, sneak as much of the sugary stuff as I could, either at meal times or by sneaking in and out of the kitchen to help myself to things. If my mom had, she was quite a good baker, so if she'd made something, you know, I'd try and sneak back in and have an extra bit, or I'd sneak in the baking cupboard and eat the baking chocolate. And so yeah, it was really a sort of overarching theme of my childhood, was this love of sweet things, spending pocket money on sweets. I had a best friend who loved sweets as well, so we used to cycle down the sweetie shop, and of course that had the inevitable impact that as a sort of pre-teen and teen, I was really overweight. And back in the day, in the 60s, that was reasonably unusual in the UK. So there weren't a lot of overweight girls in my class. I mean, I was the only one, I think. There weren't many in the school. So that starts to sort of influence you, doesn't it? And then as teenage life went on, another girl did join the class who was a bit overweight, and she was obsessed with dieting. So I had to, she was sort of telling me how, you know, how you could diet and you could do all these things and lose weight. And my mom was also a serial dieter, and looking back, I think she was definitely a food addict. You know, it can run in families, as I know now, and I've kind of looked at the literature and so on. Addiction tends to run in families, and looking back, she was definitely a food addict. She was either on a diet or off a diet. She was either baking like it was Armageddon was going to happen and we all had to eat everything in the house, or she was on some horrible celery and yogurt diet or something. And then I started joining in with that. And there's this girl at school and we'd talk about dieting. So that it started a lifelong pattern of being quite a successful dieter. Like, I did lose the weight. I got down to a reasonable weight, but you could never maintain those crazy 60s, 70s low fat, calorie diets, shake diets and all of that. I've tried them all. The weight would always creep back on. It would get to a certain point where I kind of loathed myself, and that would, yeah, I'd find some new plan and I would do the plan and do really well. And so this kind of yo-yo thing went on. So I trained as a psychologist, clinical psychologist, and worked with people with chronic health problems, and that was all fantastic, you know, going really well. But I never could quite sort out this issue that I had with my own relationship with food, which was always a real puzzle for me. And then about 10 years ago, I discovered low carb. I read a book by a British GP called Dr. John Briffer called Escape the Diet Trap. And it was essentially describing how it is that a low carbohydrate diet can lead you to be less hungry. You know, you lower your insulin, so you start burning your own fat, you know, all of that sort of basics that lots of people know now, but was a bit more unusual at the time. And yeah, so I, of course, that was the next thing that I was going to try, just the next scheme. But actually, it was for me, that was a sort of quite a game changer, really. Once I understood that carbohydrates for me were definitely, they were definitely the problem, the thing that drove the eating, drove the cravings, drove the weight gain and so on. But like you guys, it wasn't the whole answer. I was still struggling at times, or would do the classic keto treat thing, you know, where, because I loved baking as well, so I'd start making keto brownies and peanut butter cookies, and I don't know, but with almond flour and sweeteners and stuff like that. So recreating those kind of trigger foods, just in a sort of keto style. But I was kind of learning that didn't go well. There were certain things that I couldn't eat at all, couldn't have in the house, because I would just eat the whole lot, things like peanut butter that other keto people can eat. So yeah, so that was a big help and a big start of it. Then I heard probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I came across the work of Bitten Johnson, who's Swedish, and you might have heard of, and she's a really well-known clinician in the sphere of food addiction. She's been doing it forever. She's a registered nurse, and she trains other people, she trains other professionals. She had some videos on dietdoctor.com, and she was talking about, you know, food addiction. And I was like, well, blow me down. You know, I'm a psychologist. I've worked with people with addictions. How is it that I've just never put 2 and 2 together and seen my behavior as an addiction? So it was like a kind of, one of those moments where all the scales fall from your eyes. And I thought, well, that's it. It's an addiction. So I need to see it through that lens. And when you start seeing it through that lens, the whole abstinence piece makes sense, right? Because, you know, what do you do if you've got an addiction to alcohol? You stop drinking alcohol if you want to recover. Abstinence is the, you know, the way you go with nicotine, alcohol, drugs. So right, so but then you have to kind of work out what does abstinence look like is a very complicated question for us, because there isn't just one thing. We have to eat for a start. Like, so if you've got a problem with alcohol, you can avoid the bar. You don't have to have alcohol at home. You don't have to drink alcohol. You can be completely happy without it. We have to eat. So, but we have to walk this fine line between what we can eat that doesn't trigger us and what we can eat that, you know, and not having things that do. And we live in this crazy world where these foods are everywhere and they're normalized, and everybody's saying to us, oh, just have a little bit. You know, you can't not eat carbohydrate. You need carbohydrate to live, kind of thing. So we have to deal with all of that, don't we? So I got so interested in food addiction. I retired from the NHS about 3 years ago and went and did Bitton's professional training. I've been looking at the literature. We've been doing a study. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was recently published. We're doing a study on treatments for people with food addiction and campaigning for the recognition of food addiction, because as you mentioned there, Stephanie, it's so far not a recognized condition, despite probably how prevalent it is and how harmful it is to people's physical and mental health. So I've been kind of devoting myself to this whole topic since. So that's kind of how I got where I am today.
Yeah, that was actually the next.
Oh, we lost her.
Next question that I had for you is, individuals, we see, okay, we're food addicted. How long before it becomes an official diagnosis where it's more recognized and people can get the treatment that they need? How long do you think before we'll actually see that?
Well, I mean, I'm hopeful, because so 10 years ago, when I first learned about low carb, I think you know that I've done a lot of work with my husband, who's a GP. We're sort of well known for that in the UK, working with his patients with type 2 diabetes to help them get remission without drugs. And that project's ongoing, incredibly successful. 10 years ago, nobody was doing low carb in the UK for type 2 diabetes, and David went and spoke at a number of conferences and would be just shunned by the dietitians, or, you know, like booed, literally, you know, nobody wanted to talk about it. But now it's reasonably accepted, and there's been a number of statements from the various diabetes associations that low carbohydrate is, you know, is an acceptable treatment. So the reason I'm saying that is, you know, a lot has changed in 10 years as regards low carb diets and diabetes and other conditions. Like, it's pretty, you know, there's quite a lot of acceptance of the evidence around polycystic ovarian syndrome and things like that. So yeah, it's going to be complicated, the mission to get it accepted, either in, so for you guys it would be in the DSM, which is hosted by the American Psychiatric Association, and for us over in Europe it's the World Health Organization that hosts a thing called the ICD, which has all the classification of diseases in it. There's obviously going to be quite a lot of resistance to recognizing it, because of the complicated implications that would have for food, for health policy, for the food industry. A bit like the cigarette industry all those years ago never wanted to admit that nicotine was addictive, and they stood up, didn't they, in Congress and said it wasn't, nicotine wasn't addictive. You know, that's obviously that the food company's current position is that ultra processed foods and sugar is not addictive. So there's going to be quite a lot of pushback to get it recognized, but I think its time will come, and it's definitely my mission before I leave this planet, you know, to help to you know, to keep working on that project and supporting everyone else that's working on it. There is a lot of research now. There's researchers doing research into this. You know, obviously I believe in it, but I'm kind of biased, but I think more people are coming to see it and to recognize it, because, you know, what other explanation is there for when intelligent people do stupid stuff. So, you know, intelligent people with type 2 diabetes are continuing to harm themselves with the foods that they eat, in the same way that people continue smoking, even though there's a picture on the packet of your leg dropping off. You know, information isn't enough. We need to educate people about the nature of addiction and have the services there. As you said, you need the services there that people can access. And it's not just about, so some people say, well, you know, the services are there in a sense, like there's eating disorder services. I don't know about over there, but here in the UK, there's a model where when you get treated for eating disorders, it's kind of, you know, all foods are equal, everything in moderation. You have to learn to eat all foods. Well, that would be it's a kind of disaster for someone with a food addiction, because the minute you say, well, you know, it's normal to eat a dessert after your meal, that would just send us off, you know, spiraling into to other problems. So although there is a big overlap between binge eating disorder and food addiction, there's a really big overlap there. Certainly food addiction needs a different approach than the traditional all foods, you know, all foods are equal kind of message that you'd get from a traditional eating disorder service. And of course, mental health services wouldn't understand about food addiction, and addiction services wouldn't understand about food addiction. They understand about alcohol and drugs and so on. So there is a gap like that people will fall through. There is quite a lot of support online now. It's just that you've got to be able to find it, really. So we've got some pages. I work with a charity in the UK called the Public Health Collaboration, and we've got some pages in there on food addiction if people want to just look and get some general advice. I wrote a little book called Fork in the Road in lockdown, and all the proceeds from that go to the Public Health Collaboration. You can find that on Amazon, and there's also a 100-day journal to go with that now, and we're working on a workbook. There are in the States particularly, there are a number of really good people working with food addiction. You know, there's something to pay, but you do get, you know, really excellent advice and support, and there are some free meetings as well. So it's coming it's coming slowly, you know, that there is help available for people, even if, you know, some of that is kind of paid help. There is some free help available. So yeah,
we're getting there.
Progress. You can only do the next best thing, can't you, and keep moving these things forward and hope that, you know, people get on board and it becomes a bit of a, you know, it has that momentum, which I think the whole general low carb movement has got that momentum now. I don't think that's going back in the box, low carb for diabetes. I think that's accepted. So I think we can just keep pushing and you know, showing people the benefits of this kind of real food, you know, kind of way of life, and that all the benefits that can have for your health, even if you're not a food addict.
Right. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Unwin, how do you begin with your clients to determine what maybe their steps might be, or behavioral kind of modifications, you know, because we're all under the influence of here, the standard American diet and the food pyramid and all of this information that people still take as gospel. Like, how do you start out with someone with teaching and what they can do behaviorally to help?
Great question. So we always start with, so I work quite closely with a nutritionist called Heidi Yever, and we've been running groups largely. And we run intensive weekends as well, but it's very similar. We just do, one is a kind of weekly thing, and one is like you get the whole lot in a weekend. And then support, long-term support is really, really important because of this issue. Like you say, it's everywhere. There's a lot of misinformation. It's really hard to change these behaviors. They've been ingrained since we're little, you know, like my example, and you guys have probably got examples as well, where we're often raised in families that really worship food or use food as a, you know, as a proxy for affection, and those things are really kind of deeply ingrained. So it is hard to change these behaviors. So what we start with is a sort of a screen, if you like, to obviously to check people that people have the symptoms of food addiction. And we have a handy mnemonic for that, which is craved. So we go through these 6 kind of symptoms, and we get people to sort of share their own experiences, so we can, you know, we sort of hear about how it's impacted in their lives. So I'll run through them quickly. So so C, the C of craved is obviously for cravings. So do you have cravings that are so powerful that, you know, you can't resist them? So you start thinking about whatever it is, the chocolate bar in the cupboard, and you think, no, I'm not going to have the chocolate bar in the cupboard. But then it's this thought is lodged in your head, and it drives you absolutely crazy until you think you're going to lose your marbles. So you go and get the chocolate bar, have the chocolate bar. So cravings and compulsions is number 1. The R is for reaching for more, which is, you know, you say to yourself, well, I'm only going to have 2 biscuits, let's say, but you always end up having more. It's always this, you know, this sort of this effect of a bit like with alcohol, you know, like, you know, when you first start drinking alcohol, you feel pretty woozy after 1 drink. But if you carry on having 1 drink every day, then you feel completely fine with 1 drink, and you end up having 2 drinks. Excuse my cat, it's making loads of noise. Don't know if you can hear him. So it's this idea of tolerance where you're sort of building up, you're always reaching for more and more to get the same effect. A is for activities neglected. So this is where the addiction starts to sort of take over your life in unhelpful ways. So you start prioritizing getting the food, eating the food, you know, hiding away because you feel bad because you've had the food, you know, maybe turning down social invitations, maybe stopping doing hobbies and sports and things that you used to enjoy. So it starts to sort of, you know, make your world smaller and smaller, which you see in all addictions. So, you know, V is for volume, so having much more than you intended, you know, thinking, well, I'll just have 1 slice of cake, and it always ending up as 5 slices of cake. E is for exclusion. Shush. E is for exclusion, which is when you try and cut it out, the sugar and the processed foods, you get withdrawal symptoms. And so those can be things like headaches, shakiness, gastrointestinal distress, anxiety, depression, whatever it is for, you know, and that's why people continue to use, because I don't know about you guys, but I definitely had that when I was cutting down on the sugar. You feel pretty grim, and that's why people, you know, go back to it oftentimes, same as any drug. And D is quite a defining one for me. It's continued use despite damage. And this is this issue about, you know, maybe you've already got type 2 diabetes, maybe you're, you know, way overweight for what you want, maybe you feel depressed, and you know it's to do with your eating habits, but you can't change those eating habits. So just continuing to be stuck in those habits despite knowing that they're doing you harm. So craved that. So we sort of explore that with people, and then we, a bit like you asked me, you know, we ask people, well, you know, when did it first start that you were having these cravings and compulsions that you couldn't resist? How old were you when you remember that starting? And go through each of the, and are they still happening now? So if people have 3 or more currently, you know, that's a sign of of those symptoms. That's a sign of a problem. And this is according to the ICD. Those are the ICD criteria for substance use disorder. So those are the criteria you can apply to any addiction, but we're just applying them to food in this case. So do a big exploration of that with people, because I think then they understand, oh yeah, you know, it is an addiction. And I think that's a really big part of the work, is people understanding that they're addicted and they're powerless over, now powerless over this substance, because that gives them the motivation to do something different and to sort of try and get out from under it, however hard that's going to be. And once you're out from under it, then, like, if it's an addiction, as I said at the beginning, then then it's abstinence. You know, there isn't a middle way, like, oh, I just can have a little bit of sugar because it's my birthday. You'd never say to a person with an alcohol problem, well, you can have a little whiskey because, you know, it's Friday night, or, you know, it's your 50th birthday. No, they know that they can't touch any. So I think most of us understand that. So if we can apply that lens then to our eating behavior, obviously it is a struggle in the beginning, and lots of people do lapse and struggle. They don't instantly get abstinence, but that's what they're aiming for with it, you know, the community's support. And you know, we always encourage people to just get back up and get back on the horse, and you know, one day you'll get to that point where you then have a period of abstinence and you feel so amazing, and you carry on. I mean, not to be complacent, because people can relapse, like with any substance. They can relapse later on, but hopefully they then have the tools to sort of move forward. So it's understanding about addiction, developing with them a clean food plan for them. So this is all very individual. There isn't one answer that you can say for everybody. Have, you know, this is the plan, or, you know, have this amount of protein and this amount. We're all different, aren't we? Different ages, genders, activity levels, etc. But it's basically no sugar, no grains, no ultra processed food, and that's a great starting place for people. Some of us may have to eliminate other things as well, like we've said, peanut butter. I don't know if you guys have got any that you also had to eliminate. I can't really deal with dairy, actually. I've tried many times to be a cheese moderator, and it never goes well. I'm not a cheese moderator.
I can't be in the same town with a nut.
Nuts, yeah, kind of nuts. Me too. Yeah, yeah. I eat all the nuts. So, but some people can. So, and that's fine. So, hurrah for them. You know, they can they can have a portion of nuts and move on with their day. If you can't do that, then probably over time you're going to have to cut those out as well. Sweeteners as well, for a food addict, you know, always bad. Keeps the sweet thingy going. You know, it's fake. It's a fake flavor. Yeah, so nearly always have to give up sweeteners. I mean, not necessarily all. This doesn't either have to be cold turkey. Like, people can do this in a sort of stepwise way. And oftentimes, and this is the thing that people get most mad about, alcohol, because it just acts in the same part of the brain. You know, physiologically, it's well, it disinhibits you, doesn't it? You're more likely to make bad choices. Makes you more hungry because you've not got that gluconeogenesis going on, so you're hungrier as well. So alcohol is nearly always a trigger for cravings and possibly relapses. But some people manage with a little tiny bit here and there. Again, it's very individual. So food plan is the next bit, and then really it's all just about how are you going to cope. How are you going to keep that going in life? So how will you manage when it's the holidays? How will you manage at a restaurant? How will you, because all of these things are real big changes in behavior, and often there is pushback from friends and family around the changes you're trying to make. If you live in a house with other people who aren't going to do this with you, it's doubly hard, really, because their food's still going to be around, and we're so cued, it's our environment's so important, for those of us who, fortunately for me, David does low carb as well, so that's fine. We just have the foods in the house that we actually, he has one or two things that I don't. He can eat nuts, god damn it. So there are nuts in the house, but I'm fine. I've got to the point of peace. It doesn't sound like it, does it? I thought I'd got to the point of peace with the nuts, and he has some dark chocolate, which I never have. So, but yeah, it's super tough if you're in a household where other people are still eating otherwise. So you have to, really think about that. So we talk about, having your own shelf in the fridge, having your own cupboard, get them to sort of, hopefully keep their junk away from you. Yeah, so then it's just keep working on that, having plans. It's really important to be prepared and to plan and to think things through and get long-term support. So yeah, we have online support groups for people who've done our course, or there's There's groups like Overeaters Anonymous, where you can get free, that's the sort of 12-step program where you can get free support. Yeah, I think there's sugar addict. Yeah, go on.
Can I just add, this just reminded me when you were talking, do you think that that 20% number that we mentioned must be much higher than that? That
Yeah.
Right? Because isn't the issue that people aren't even trying to take those foods out, so might not even have any inkling that they are addicted? Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. Bitten would say there's a certain proportion that are sort of proper food addicts, if you like, that have had these symptoms all their life, struggled all their life, and really can't have any at all. You know, it's going to be a problem. I think there's another quite a large proportion of people who are harmful users. You know, like, you know, you can have harmful users of alcohol. They do drink too much, but that's just a sort of cultural, social thing that they've got into. So I think that's also the case with ultra processed food, is that some people eat a lot of it and they would struggle to some extent to give it up because it's so much part of their lives. But whether they're got that true addiction to food, you know. So when we saw a lot of people for helping them with their type 2 diabetes and going low carb, some people who had really like shockingly high levels of sugar and carbohydrate consumption could hear the information about, you know, why it makes sense to stop. They could understand the physiology and then could go ahead and do it, and then didn't need that much support. Once they'd understood it, they could go ahead and do it, and they were fine. And then there's this other group, which is more like the addicted group, who really struggled to implement the advice without extra explanation, support. So there seem to be addicted people, harmful users, and then sort of maybe just social users, you know, people who eat. And then there's moderators, which is kind of, you know, strange unicorn species that can have a slice of cake and move on with the day. And you know, we all know some people that can genuinely do that and really don't understand that we can't. Yeah.
I was just thinking, whenever you were going through the acronym for the diagnosis and saying if you hit at least 3 of those, then you qualify as being addicted. And I could say all 5.
Yeah.
And probably from the time I was about 4 or 5 years old, like I remember sneaking food and hiding to eat it and squirreling little bits away and sweets, and you know, it was a mess. So
you're probably I mean, I don't know, because, you know, you've just told me that and we're just chatting about it, but, you know, that sounds like, yes, you know, you're a typical person with food addiction. We tend to have it you tend to be born with it. And that's probably because there is this big genetic factor. Like I say, my mom, I recognized definitely the symptoms in her. Sometimes people come from families where it's not necessarily even food addiction, but there are other addiction problems like drink or drugs or gambling or whatever it is. It's just some of us have those brains that can get easily hooked into these sort of behaviors. And, you know, I don't know if it's the same for you, but, you know, I can get hooked into other things as well, like too much online shopping, too much scrolling on the phone. You know, I'm really drawn to these sort of dopamine hits. And we have to be careful in our recovery about all of that stuff as well, because that can just unbalances really in this modern world where there's lots of dopamine possibilities.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely, I come from a family with some addiction issues that may or may not have included food, and a lot of it was alcohol, whereas I can take or leave alcohol. I've never really been a big drinker, but you know, cupcakes.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, same. I've actually given up alcohol completely, but it wasn't a problem for me. I probably only had 1 drink every month or something like that. But yeah, it's incredibly interesting when you start asking people about the backgrounds, and you say, oh, anyone else with any addiction problems? And it's so interesting how many you know, actually kind of appear. And oftentimes women that I talked to might have fathers who had an alcohol. It was more like you say, it's more typically an alcohol problem, and it's so interesting. I don't think we, know the whole story yet about the genetics, or how that happens, or exactly what's going on with the brain, but it does seem to be something to do with this dopamine system.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, because it could be other things for me, like the online shopping, or just different things that I can get obsessive about. Even in the past, obsessive about dieting, like that became my addiction. Yes. At that point, or exercise, or I just have one of those brains that just latches onto something.
Latch onto something, and then
yeah.
Right.
And
then it's over. Then it's over. You move on to something else. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The next dopamine hit.
There does seem to be something as well about our special addict brains and these attention, sort of attention problems in some way, or sort of not problems exactly, but kind of like impulsiveness, or getting kind of stuck onto stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
That's
does that,
so fascinating.
It is. Yeah. Amy and I talk about dopamine all the time, and trying to make that connection, like how is that affecting our brain? And is that connected to ADHD and other things, like symptoms that I feel that I have? But
yeah, absolutely. So much kind of interesting research to be done. If only we could get people to recognize that it was a problem. With so much work to be done. Yeah, dopamine's absolutely fascinating, isn't it? Yeah. You guys you've read Anna Lemke's book, presumably, Dopamine Nation. Yeah.
I have not.
You must.
You must.
I will put that on the list.
Put that on the long list. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very long list.
Yeah.
So what, in light of all of that and the normal, follow the food pyramid kind of thing, what is the best way to get this information to people? What's the most effective way that you have found to let everybody know that food addiction is a thing, and that there are ways around it?
Yeah, well, I'm banging away on social media as much as I can, on Twitter at @Jen_Unwin, and I try and talk at as many, so we get invited to speak at a lot of low carb conferences, of course, about the David's always speaking about the work that he's done with type 2 diabetes, and increasingly I'm getting asked to talk about food addiction, so that's great. Low carb practitioners and other people will take that information, and they're spreading it. That I wrote the little book, so it's super accessible. It's not a sciencey book at all. It is just for Joe public to be able to understand, just in exactly the terms that we've sort of been talking about today, what it is, what's happening in the brain, how your food plan is really important, and what a difference that would make. And then, as you say, the behavioral stuff about trying to sort of change these behaviors, ingraining new habits. And then that beyond the food, we've got these brains, as we've just got onto, and it's not just about the food and being obsessed with that, but it is about having this kind of self-care, how are you getting your dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins dose, I call it in the book. How are you getting your dose of the good stuff every day? You might not like exercising, but can you, what kind of movement are you incorporating every day, not for weight loss, but for your mood, getting outside in the sunshine, hobbies, if it's your thing, a spiritual practice. So all of that kind of wraps around and protects your recovery going forwards, and being part of the community and connecting with other people. I don't know about you, but it always lifts me up to talk to people like you, or other people who've experienced the same symptoms, because you kind of feel yet again, that actually I'm not completely mad and isolated, and the only one who has these struggles. There's loads of us, and there is hope, and we can get out of it and support each other to do that. So so connecting with community is incredibly important as well.
Mm. I think, you know, the connection is 100% so important. I'm so glad you said that, because just not enough can be said about people being able to be around people who, you know, your mirror neurons are like, you know,
Yes.
sucking in that. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so incredibly important. I'm so glad you said that.
It is. And you know, that we've actually got modern technology to thank for that, and the fact that we can talk, and you know, we can get on Zoom calls with people all over the world and say, you know, well, I'm eating this, that's kind of normal for me. You know, maybe in our families it looks completely abnormal what we're doing, but you know, for this group of people that I can meet with online, yes, we're all, you know, we're all doing the same thing. And that's what's great about, you know, your Facebook group and all of these groups that are just, everybody's supporting everyone to make changes, you know, just to keep trying, basically, to do the best thing.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Unwin. We so appreciate that. I don't know, you've kind of delved into this already, but are there things that you're working on right now that you'd like to tell us about? Or also the other thing I was thinking about is your work with your husband, and the success you've seen in that. Are there studies being done on his population of patients that have been able to reverse things and that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's I don't know how many papers that I mean, I'm not on all of them. I'm on quite a few of them, but if you Google Unwin type 2 diabetes reversal or something like that, you'd see there's quite a series of papers on things like, you know, so initially people said, well, if people go low carb, their cholesterol panel is going to look terrible and they'll all have heart attacks. So he's been gathering the data for, you know, this decade now on people's cholesterols, and they actually improve. And people said, well, they're all eating loads of protein, so the kidneys are going to pack up. So he's looked at kidney function, blood pressure. So, you know, he's kind of published on each of those topics, really, as well as, you know, the number of people he's been able to get completely drug-free and in remission of their diabetes type 2. So yeah, lots going on there. And also there's lots of videos of him speaking if people just Google his name. So yeah, that's all going great. So that's ongoing. So we've just Heidi and I and some guys from the States and from Sweden have just had a paper published on the outcomes of an audit of our clinical program for people with food addiction, and it's looking great. People, their mental well-being improved, their symptoms of food addiction on 2 different scales came down really significantly. We weren't really that interested in weight because people with food addiction could be underweight, normal weight, and overweight. So, you know, you're not necessarily looking for weight loss, but there was a significant weight loss. Yeah, and yeah, we're just keeping working away at the trying to get the ICD to recognize food addiction as a symptom, and carrying on with, yeah, we're still running the weekends, working on so as I say, we've got the book and a journal published for Fork in the Road, working on a workbook so people could work through the things that we've talked about. They can work through them in their own time in a workbook, rather than have to join a course necessarily, if that's how they prefer to do stuff. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be more things.
I'm excited about the workbook, because your book was one of the first ones I read that I really connected with the idea that I was food addicted. And I've gifted that book to many people, and we've all loved it. And so we'll definitely be looking forward to the workbook. That's exciting. Super.
Thank you.
And we'll have that linked down below too, so people can check that out, and along with any other way that they can contact you, follow you on Instagram or
Yeah, Twitter's probably the best. Yeah,
Twitter. Okay. All right. We'll link that.
Unwin. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I am on Instagram, but I don't really understand it, so I don't post, post very much. Someone needs to explain it.
I feel the same way about Twitter.
Okay, yeah, we can do a tutorial. We'll swap.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, I think that's all we have for you for today. Thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation. We could just talk about food addiction and dopamine and all of that all day long, but we won't keep you.
That's fine. Have me back if if people have got lots of questions. I'm happy to come on.
Wonderful.
Do a live or something. Yeah, really happy to do that.
Great. We would absolutely love that. So we're going to wrap up for now. And thank you for everyone watching. We'll have, like I said, all those links down below, how you can follow Dr. Unwin, purchase her book, and that workbook. That sounds very interesting, very helpful. Like, it would be a great tool. Take a minute to share, subscribe, comment. If you have any questions for Dr. Unwin, let us know. We can pass those along and maybe plan another video. Don't forget, you can join us for meetings on the Mighty Networks at Heart Carnivore. We'll have that link down below also, as well as the ways that you can keep in contact with all of us here at Beyond the Scale. Until next time, thanks. Bye.